if you were to ask the ancient Greeks, or indeed the Romans who so enthusiastically adopted her, about the most dazzling, the most utterly captivating of all the immortals, one name would bubble to the surface with the froth of the sea itself: Venus. Or to give her her original Greek title, Aphrodite, she was the Olympian in charge of a portfolio that included love, desire, beauty, pleasure, and procreation. Quite the job description, I'm sure you'll agree. She wasn't a goddess of quiet, contemplative affection, oh no. Her brand of love was the passionate, overwhelming, sometimes disastrous kind that starts wars, topples kingdoms, and makes for absolutely splendid stories. She was, in essence, the universe's ultimate force of attraction, a walking, talking embodiment of all things beautiful and desirable. Now, how does such a creature come into being? Well, her origin story is rather more dramatic than most. Forget the usual divine parentage and celestial nurseries. Venus's birth was a shocking, audacious, and frankly rather messy affair that began with a bit of cosmic castration. The primordial god of the sky, Uranus, was not a particularly pleasant father to his children, the Titans. His son, Cronus, decided he'd had enough. Armed with a flint sickle given to him by his mother, Gaia, Cronus did the unspeakable and separated his father from his divine manhood. The severed parts were tossed with some abandon into the churning sea. One doesn't simply discard divine anatomy without consequences, you see. From the resulting mixture of divine essence and sea foam, aphros in the Greek, a figure began to form. It was a sight that would have stopped traffic had traffic been invented. A fully grown woman of such breathtaking beauty that the very heavens and earth paused to stare. This was Venus, born not from a womb but from an act of primordial violence and the magic of the ocean. She drifted ashore on a giant scallop shell, first landing on the island of Cythera and then making her way to Cyprus. The Horai, the goddesses of the seasons, were there to greet her, clothing her in celestial garments and placing a golden crown upon her head. What an entrance! It certainly beats being delivered by a stork. Upon her arrival at Mount Olympus, the home of the gods, she caused an immediate and predictable sensation. The gods, from mighty Zeus down to the last minor deity, were utterly besotted. Bickering and rivalries instantly erupted as they all vied for her hand in marriage. To prevent a full-scale immortal war breaking out over her, Hera, the ever-practical queen of the gods, insisted she be married off at once. And who was the lucky groom? Not Apollo, the radiant god of music, nor Ares, the strapping god of war. No, in a twist of cosmic irony, the goddess of sublime beauty was wed to Hephaestus, the lame, soot-stained and decidedly unglamorous god of the forge. A master craftsman he may have been, but a romantic lead he was not. This, as you might imagine, was a recipe for celestial scandal. Venus's power wasn't found in thunderbolts or earthquakes, but in something far more subtle and arguably more potent: the human and divine heart. Her primary domain was influence. She could incite overwhelming passion, deep-seated love, or maddening lust in anyone she chose, be they mortal or god. Resistance was, for the most part, entirely futile. When Venus decided you were going to fall in love, you fell, and you fell hard. This power was her greatest weapon and her favorite toy, allowing her to manipulate the grand tapestry of fate with a single, well-aimed glance. She didn't need to command armies. She could simply make the generals fall in love with the enemy queen, which was far more efficient and infinitely more entertaining. To aid her in these amorous endeavors, she possessed a rather special piece of equipment, the cestus. This was no ordinary belt or girdle. It was a marvel of divine craftsmanship, an embroidered sash imbued with all the enchantments of desire. It held within its threads the power of sweet talk, longing glances, seductive whispers, and every trick in the book of flirtation. When she wore it, her already considerable allure was amplified to an irresistible degree. Crucially, she wasn't shy about lending it out. When Hera wanted to distract her husband Zeus from the Trojan War, she knew exactly who to borrow from. With the cestus wrapped around her waist, the queen of the gods became so enchanting that Zeus forgot all about mortals and their silly battles for a good while. Of course, no great goddess is complete without her retinue and symbols. Venus was often accompanied by her son, the mischievous and sometimes downright dangerous Eros, whom the Romans called Cupid. This winged infant, armed with a bow and a quiver of arrows tipped with either gold for love or lead for aversion, was her field agent. He would fly about, shooting his arrows into the hearts of unsuspecting victims at his mother's command, or sometimes just for his own amusement. Besides her son, Venus was associated with a menagerie of creatures that symbolized her domains. The dove for its gentle and monogamous reputation, the swan for its elegance and grace, and the sparrow for its rather more lustful nature. Her influence extended beyond just romantic love. She was also the goddess of the sea from which she was born, and sailors would pray to her for calm waters and safe passage. She was a goddess of gardens and vegetation, representing the fertile, life-giving beauty of the natural world. This connection made her a goddess of prosperity and good fortune. To the ancient Greeks and Romans, her presence was felt in the bloom of a flower, the beauty of a sunset, the inexplicable pull towards another person, and the peaceful surface of the sea. She wasn't just an abstract concept of love, she was the living, breathing force behind all the beauty and pleasure the world had to offer. One simply cannot discuss Venus without mentioning the Trojan War, a decade-long conflict for which she was, in a very real sense, the catalyst. It all started, as so many troubles do, at a wedding. The goddess of discord, Eris, furious at not being invited, tossed a golden apple into the festivities, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." Naturally, three goddesses immediately laid claim to it: Hera, Athena, and Venus. Zeus, wisely wanting no part in this impossible decision, outsourced the job to a handsome mortal shepherd named Paris, a prince of Troy. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised power, Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle, but Venus, playing to her strengths, promised him the most beautiful woman in the world for his wife. That woman was Helen, queen of Sparta. There was just one tiny complication. She was already married to King Menelaus, but a promise is a promise, especially one from the goddess of love. Paris, his head filled with visions of Helen's beauty, awarded the apple to Venus without a second thought. True to her word, Venus helped Paris sail to Sparta and abduct, or elope with, depending on which version you read, the lovely Helen. This act, this face that launched 1,000 ships, was the spark that ignited the Trojan War. The Greeks assembled a vast army to sail to Troy and get her back, and the gods themselves took sides in the brutal conflict that followed. All for a golden apple and a promise from Venus. Venus's own love life was, to put it mildly, complicated. Her marriage to the industrious but dull Hephaestus was a sham from the start. Her true passion was for someone far more exciting, Ares, the handsome, brutal and thrilling god of war. Their affair was the worst-kept secret on Olympus. They would meet in secret whenever Hephaestus was busy at his forge, their trysts a perfect blend of love and war, beauty and violence. Eventually, Helios, the all-seeing sun god, spotted them and snitched to the cuckolded husband. Hephaestus, a craftsman of genius, forged an invisible, unbreakable net and set a trap over his marital bed. The next time the lovers met, the net sprang shut, trapping them in a most compromising position for all the other gods to see and laugh at. Beyond her Olympian affairs, Venus also had a famous and tragic romance with a mortal man, the handsome hunter Adonis. She was so utterly smitten with him that she neglected her divine duties, preferring to roam the forests by his side. Fearing for his safety, she warned him against hunting dangerous beasts like boars and lions. Adonis, being a proud young hunter, laughed off her concerns. It was a fatal mistake. One day, while hunting, he was gored by a wild boar, an animal sacred to Ares, who was perhaps a little jealous. Venus heard his cries and rushed to his side, but it was too late. From his blood, the anemone flower sprang forth, a beautiful but fragile bloom, a perfect symbol of their tragic love. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, Venus was far more than just a character in a series of racy stories. She was a fundamental part of their daily lives and spiritual beliefs. People from all walks of life, from statesmen to sailors to young lovers, would pray to her. They would ask for her favor in finding a spouse, for fertility to continue their family line, or for a safe voyage across the seas she was born from. Temples were built in her honor, most famously on the islands of Cyprus and Cythera, her legendary birthplaces. Festivals known as the Aphrodisia were held where she was worshipped with offerings of flowers, incense and doves. She was a source of hope, a divine power that governed one of life's most powerful and mysterious forces. Her importance was particularly pronounced in Roman culture. The Romans, who called her Venus, claimed a direct lineage from her. The legendary hero Aeneas, who escaped the fall of Troy and whose descendants would go on to found Rome, was said to be her son by the mortal prince Anchises. This made Venus the divine mother of the entire Roman people. Great leaders like Julius Caesar proudly proclaimed their descent from her, using this divine connection to legitimize their power and command respect. For Rome, she wasn't just a goddess of love, she was Venus Genetrix, the sacred ancestor, and her favor was intertwined with the destiny of their empire. She lent Rome an aura of divine grace and beauty. The stories of Venus, filled with passion, jealousy, humor, and tragedy, were more than just entertainment. They were a way for ancient peoples to understand the chaotic and often irrational nature of love and desire. Why do people fall in love? Why does it sometimes lead to joy and sometimes to disaster? The myths of Venus provided a framework for these questions. By personifying love as a beautiful, powerful, and sometimes capricious goddess, they could make sense of their own emotional experiences. Venus's actions explained why love could be both a creative and a destructive force, a source of sublime happiness and profound suffering. She was the divine explanation for the human heart's wildest impulses. Centuries after her temples have crumbled to dust, Venus remains an enduring icon. Her influence is everywhere, from the art of the Renaissance masters like Botticelli to the very name of the second planet from our sun, the bright evening star that has captivated stargazers for millennia. She appears in poetry, literature, and film, her name a universal shorthand for beauty, romance, and feminine power. The stories first told about her around ancient Greek campfires continue to be retold, her character a timeless archetype of love's overwhelming force. She reminds us that while empires rise and fall and gods are forgotten, the fundamental human experiences of love and the appreciation of beauty are, much like the goddess herself, truly immortal.